The choreography of fear that surrounds Taiwan at the moment is performance conducted most recently by the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. And the central claim here that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan may be imminent, but perhaps the more revealing message was not about Asia but Europe and what Washington thinks we ought to be doing, or rather not doing, in response. Hegseth's comments come at a fraught moment. President Xi has indeed instructed the People's Liberation Army to prepare for the capability to take Taiwan by 2027. This is a significant benchmark, but not, and I think not, a scheduled date for war. And our job at the moment, I think, should be to engage with China. But Hegseth has said there's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat is real and it could be imminent. Imminent, well, that's the language of alarm, of brinkmanship, and it sits uneasily alongside more measured assessments from American generals and intelligence officers. And Hegseth wasn't really speaking to President Xi, he was speaking to Seoul, to Tokyo, to Canberra, and with some irritation to Brussels, Berlin and London. To Europe, he said, stay home, guard your own borders, we'll handle Asia. But to Asia, he said, look to Europe. They're finally spending real money on defence, why aren't you? This isn't just strategic posturing, it's budgetary theatre. And the US wants allies to pay up, preferably in two theatres at once. But when resources are scarce, it's clear which theatre the Pentagon prizes, the Indo-Pacific. Europe, under this logic, is to play housekeeper in its own garden while the US squares off against Beijing in the courtyard of the Pacific. And this raises profound questions. First, is a Chinese invasion of Taiwan genuinely imminent? Most serious analysts would say no. And the capabilities that China might possess, particularly in terms of amphibious warfare and logistics, remain untested. Taiwan is not a pushover, and failure would cost President Xi more than just lives. It would threaten the myth of inevitability that undergirds his rule. Second, it doesn't make sense for Europe simply to sit back. Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign affairs chief, thinks not. She quite rightly reminded Hegseth that the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific are not so easily separated. China's support for Russia and North Korean troops, reportedly aiding Moscow in Ukraine, suggest a growing axis of authoritarianism. To treat the theatres as disconnected is strategic myopia. And we shouldn't forget that China is also a colossal trading partner. Many countries, not just in Asia, but in Africa, Latin America, and yes, even in Europe, are caught in a double bind, dependent on Chinese capital, yet reliant on US security. And Hegseth warns us that this duality is unsustainable. He's right in one sense. Entanglement can become ensnarement, but the solution is not to bark at smaller nations to pick sides, it's to offer credible alternatives. So far, the West has been very slow to do so. And then there's the danger of the rhetoric itself. As Kallas reportedly asked, does this escalatory language risk miscalculation? Are we inching towards confrontation not by action but by posturing? So what are we witnessing? This is not simply about Taiwan, it's about the architecture of global order, and the United States is repositioning itself as a Pacific power fist and first, a European partner second, and in this pugilistic standoff. And Europe is expected to absorb this message with gratitude and checkbook in hand. It's not unpatriotic or pacifist to ask whether this strategy is wise. Not least because I think there are better ways of dealing with China. If we are entering a new Cold War, and I'd say if, very carefully, then we must learn from the last. And deterrence is not just about tanks and ships. It's about clarity, credibility, restraint, and conversation. And screaming imminent into the void may serve a political purpose in Washington, but it risks sowing panic and provocation elsewhere. Europe cannot and should not retreat into its shell. But nor should it accept the logic that says only our contribution to global stability is regional containment while others play a much greater power drama. We have a role to play, and our role is diplomatic. as well as defensive. But the just war is not fought at first, it's fought at last, after we have tried diplomacy, after we have tried talking, after we have exhausted talking. And it seems to me that Donald Trump and his team are pitching into battle before there's even any evidence that there's real hostility. We live in a world which is so fractured and so anxious, and there's already plenty of danger and plenty of war. And yet Trump seems determined to make more, economically and physically. I find this very threatening. At a time when there are threats enough, we have an American president who is waving sabres. It's extraordinary.